The prison of comparison. From the earliest days of human history, we have looked sideways, not forward, not inward, but sideways, measuring ourselves against the lives of others. In the small villages of ancient Greece or Rome, envy was born in the marketplace. One farmer gazed at another's harvest. One merchant compared his store to his neighbor's. One soldier noticed the shine of another's armor. The instinct to compare is old, older than philosophy, older than empires. It is woven into us, a remnant of survival. If your neighbor had more, your tribe might survive longer, leaving you vulnerable. But what once began as vigilance has become a prison. Comparison, unchecked, becomes envy. Envy becomes bitterness. And bitterness, left to grow, corrodes the soul from the inside out. The Stoics were clear about this danger. Seneca warned, "It is the quality of a great soul to scorn great wealth and to think nothing of it." He saw how envy and comparison chain people to endless dissatisfaction. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, reminded himself, "Do not indulge in comparisons with others, or you will either become bitter with those who are above you, or arrogant toward those below." Even in their world, without Instagram, without influencers, without billionaires flashing wealth on global screens, comparison was recognized as poison. What then of us? We live in an age where comparison is not an occasional shadow but a constant floodlight. Our devices place thousands of curated lives before us daily, each one polished to sparkle, each one whispering, "Look at me. Look what I have. Look how you fall short." The result is predictable. Anxiety rises. Dissatisfaction festers. What once was the occasional pang of envy has become a permanent ache. But let us pause and see this clearly. Comparison does not just steal joy, it distorts reality. Social media is not a mirror, it is a hall of mirrors, each reflection twisted. The smiling faces hide depression. The luxury vacations hide debt. The seemingly perfect couples hide conflict. Yet we measure our ordinary, unedited lives against their curated illusions. It is like comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's highlight reel. Psychology confirms what the Stoics intuited. Studies show that upward social comparison, measuring yourself against those you perceive as better, correlates strongly with depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. The mind fixates on what is lacking, not what is present. And downward comparison, measuring against those worse off, breeds arrogance, which is no less a prison. In both directions, the gaze is distorted. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When your thoughts are consumed with comparison, happiness slips away. Comparison steals time. Hours vanish in scrolling, in silent measurement, in daydreaming of a life not yours. Comparison poisons relationships. Friends become rivals. Colleagues become enemies. Comparison breeds resentment against those who appear above you and against yourself for not measuring up. And perhaps most tragically, comparison blinds you to your own path. While you are busy measuring another's progress, you neglect your own. While you chase their image of success, you betray your own values. You become a shadow of someone else's life, instead of the author of your own. The Stoics prescribe an antidote. Focus on what is within your control. You cannot control another's fortune, talent, or recognition. You can only control your choices, your effort, your response. To compare is to abandon what is yours for what is not. Epictetus taught, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In other words, let go of how you measure against others. Anchor yourself instead in growth, in integrity, and virtue. This does not mean ignoring others entirely. It means transforming comparison into inspiration. To see another's excellence not as a mirror, but as a guidepost. Instead of envying the disciplined athlete, learn from their routine. Instead of resenting the skilled musician, let their dedication spark your own practice. Comparison when purified, becomes admiration, and admiration can fuel growth. But the line is delicate. Admiration uplifts, envy corrodes. The difference lies in intention. Do you look outward to learn, or do you look outward to measure? One path liberates, the other imprisons. Modern psychology offers tools to aid this Stoic wisdom. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches us to identify distorted thoughts, the shoulds and musts we impose upon ourselves through comparison. I should be further along by now. I must have what they have to be happy. By challenging these thoughts, we loosen comparison's grip. Gratitude practices also counter envy. By daily naming what is present and good in your own life, the illusion of lack begins to dissolve. Think of comparison as a fire. Left unattended, it burns uncontrollably, consuming peace. But fire, when harnessed, can warm, can illuminate. The choice is whether you let comparison burn you, or whether you redirect it into fuel for your own path. The Stoics chose the latter. They did not deny the existence of others' fortunes. They simply refused to be enslaved by them. Their gaze returned always to their own mind, their own choices, their own alignment with nature. That was the measure of a life well lived. Not wealth, not fame, not applause. So we must ask ourselves, where is comparison stealing life from us? Is it in the envy of someone else's success and the bitterness of another's recognition? In the scrolling that leaves us hollow? Awareness is the first step. The prison door cannot open if we do not see it as closed. But awareness must be followed by practice. Daily, we redirect the gaze. Daily, we remind ourselves what is mine to control and what is not. Daily, we practice gratitude for our own portion, however small. In this way, comparison loses its teeth, and in its absence, clarity grows. We see our own path more clearly. We walk it with steadiness, unshaken by the noise of others. We discover the quiet satisfaction of alignment, of living not as a mirror, but as a mountain, steady in our own being. This is freedom. And freedom, the Stoics remind us, is the only true wealth.
There is a subtle cruelty in comparison that we often overlook. It does not just make us dissatisfied with our own lives, it blinds us to the humanity of those we envy. When you see someone only as a standard to measure yourself against, you stop seeing them as a full, complex being. You reduce them to a symbol of your own inadequacy. Their struggles vanish, their suffering becomes invisible, and all that remains is their supposed superiority. But every human life, no matter how glittering on the outside, carries its own burdens. The wealthy entrepreneur may battle loneliness. The beautiful celebrity may feel trapped by the very image others worship. The athlete at the top of their game may live with constant pain. Comparison hides these truths. It creates illusions of perfection, when in reality, no one escapes the trials of existence. The Stoics knew this well. They taught that fortune is fickle, that external appearances tell us little about the state of the soul. Seneca wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." This was not cynicism, it was clarity. To envy another's portion is to ignore that they too carry unseen struggles. Modern psychology echoes this in studies of the spotlight effect. We believe others live in the glow of constant attention and ease, while in truth, most are just as insecure, just as preoccupied, just as fragile as we are. Envy makes us blind not only to our own blessings, but to their hidden battles.
There is liberation in remembering this. When you feel the sting of comparison, pause and remind yourself, I do not see the whole of their life. I see only the surface. Beneath it lies a human being as vulnerable as me. This shift transforms envy into empathy. Instead of resenting their fortune, you recognize their shared humanity. But comparison does not only flow upward toward those we envy. It also flows downward toward those we feel superior to. And here too lies a trap. When we measure ourselves against those worse off, we may feel temporary pride, even smugness. But this is a fragile, hollow kind of worth. It depends on others remaining below us. It requires us to secretly root for their stagnation, and it leaves us perpetually anxious. What if they rise? What if we fall? Marcus Aurelius warned against this arrogance. He reminded himself daily that all humans share the same nature, the same mortality, the same brief passage through time. To look down on another is as foolish as to envy them. Both distract from the only true measure, how you live your own life.
There is another hidden cost of comparison, one rarely acknowledged. It breeds ingratitude. When you fix your gaze on what others have, you lose sight of what is already yours. The friend who envies another's career overlooks the stability of their own. The parent who envies another's home misses the joy in their child's laughter. Gratitude cannot coexist with envy, and without gratitude, even abundance feels like poverty. The antidote, then, is to practice presence, to return your gaze from what is absent to what is here. This does not mean ignoring ambition. The Stoics were not against striving, but they urged striving for virtue, for wisdom, for alignment with nature, not for possessions or recognition. Those belong to fortune, not to you. Imagine two travelers on a road. One spends the journey staring into the distance, comparing their pace to others, resenting those ahead, scorning those behind. They arrive exhausted, bitter, dissatisfied. The other walks steadily, focused on their own steps, appreciating the scenery, learning from those they meet along the way. They arrive not only at the destination, but with peace and tact. Both traveled the same road, but only one was free. Modern culture, of course, pushes us toward the first traveler. Advertisements are designed to provoke comparison. Your car is not enough. Your clothes are not enough. Your body is not enough. Social media algorithms reward envy, amplifying lives that spark dissatisfaction. Even education and careers are framed as races, with winners and losers measured by external markers. To resist this tide requires deliberate practice. It requires, as Epictetus said, to make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Your power lies not in outpacing others, but in walking your path with clarity. And here lies the paradox. When you stop obsessing over others, you often surpass your own expectations. Energy once wasted on envy becomes fuel for growth. Time once spent in resentment becomes time spent in practice. By focusing inward, you often achieve more outwardly, but now it matters less, because your worth is no longer chained to recognition. This is not to say the pull of comparison disappears overnight. It is a habit deeply ingrained. Even the Stoics admitted to feeling its tug. But they also knew habits can be reshaped. Each time you notice comparison rising, you have a choice: indulge it or release it. Each release is a step toward freedom. There is a line from Marcus Aurelius that speaks to this directly. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Notice what he lists. Not wealth, not fame, not power, but the simple, universal gifts of existence. To wake, to breathe, to love. These belong to all, regardless of rank. To compare is to forget this abundance. To remember is to be free. So let us return to the metaphor of fire. Comparison, left unchecked, consumes. But comparison, transformed, can warm. How? By shifting it into inspiration. See someone excelling, not as proof of your inadequacy, but as evidence of what is possible. Let their discipline spark your own. Let their wisdom guide your path. Do not measure against them, learn from them. This is the practice of admiration. And admiration, unlike envy, leaves no poison. It uplifts both the giver and the receiver. It recognizes excellence without self-diminishment. It transforms the sideways gaze into a forward step. In this way, even comparison can be redeemed. But only when guided by clarity, by humility, by the wisdom to know the difference between envy and inspiration.
There is a story from the ancient Cynic philosopher Diogenes. One day, he saw a child drinking water from his cupped hand at a fountain. Diogenes, who had been carrying a wooden bowl, immediately threw it aside, exclaiming, "A child has beaten me in simplicity." This moment captures something profound. Instead of feeling diminished by the child's example, Diogenes felt liberated. He allowed the sight of another's way to sharpen his own practice of freedom. Here lies the choice before each of us. We can see another's life and feel lessened, or we can see it and feel reminded of what is possible. The first choice leads to bitterness, the second to growth. But to take the second path requires humility. It requires the courage to admire without needing to measure. It requires a strong enough sense of self to let another's excellence inspire rather than wound. The modern world makes this choice harder. Everywhere, we are trained to rank ourselves. Schools assign grades not only to measure progress, but to pit students against one another. Workplaces offer performance reviews, promotions, and salaries that stoke envy. Even leisure is infiltrated by comparison. Fitness apps ranking steps, games ranking scores, social platforms ranking followers. It is as though the entire culture has conspired to keep us imprisoned.
And yet, the Stoics would remind us, the prison door is not locked. The key has always been in our hands. The lock is internal, not external. No algorithm can control the gaze of your mind if you choose otherwise. So, what does choosing otherwise look like in practice? It looks like waking in the morning and, before reaching for your phone, reaching for gratitude, noticing your breath, noticing your body, noticing one thing, however small, that is already good. It looks like catching yourself mid-comparison and pausing. Is this thought within my control, or is it wasted energy? It looks like setting boundaries with media, remembering that much of what you see is theater, not truth. It looks like redirecting envy into effort. When you notice another's strength, ask, what habits built that? Could I borrow their discipline, not their image? It looks like cultivating friendships rooted not in rivalry, but in mutual uplift, where another's success does not diminish you, but enriches you. And perhaps most importantly, it looks like grounding your worth in something unshakable. For the Stoics, that unshakable ground was virtue, living in harmony with reason, justice, courage, and temperance. For modern psychology, it may also include values-based living, choosing actions aligned with what matters most to you, not what looks impressive to others. Both point to the same truth. If your worth rests on comparison, it will crumble. If it rests on integrity, it will endure.
Imagine your life as a garden. Comparison makes you stare at your neighbor's plot, envying their roses, resenting their shade, mocking their weeds. Meanwhile, your own soil lies untended, your plants wither. But when you return your gaze to your garden, watering, planting, pruning, you discover it can bloom in its own way. It may not look like theirs, but it was never meant to. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "A man should be upright, not kept upright. To live from your own root, not propped by the opinions of others. To cultivate your garden, not for their gaze, but for its own flourishing." There is, however, one last twist to the prison of comparison. Sometimes, we do not compare ourselves upward or downward, but inward against a fantasy version of ourselves. We imagine the ideal me, more successful, more disciplined, more admired. And we measure today's self against that imagined one. This too can become a prison. The Stoics remind us, you are not yet perfect, and that is not failure. It is nurture. No tree scorns itself for not yet being fully grown. No river despises itself for not yet reaching the sea. Growth is slow. To berate yourself for not being at the finish line is to miss the purpose of the path.
So, when comparison arises within, remember Epictetus's wisdom. First, say to yourself what you would be. and then do what you have to do. The ideal self is not a tormentor, but a guide. Not a mirror of failure, but a compass for direction. Use it gently, not cruelly. Let us then gather the threads. Comparison is ancient, but it need not rule us. It blinds us to gratitude, corrodes relationships, distorts reality. But it can be transformed. It can become admiration, inspiration, even a guide toward growth. If we hold it lightly, if we ground ourselves not in appearances but in integrity. Freedom from comparison is not indifference. It is clarity. It is walking your path steadily, learning from others without being chained to them. It is tending your garden with care, even as others tend theirs. It is choosing gratitude over envy, admiration over bitterness, practice over performance. And when this freedom takes root, life changes. Joy becomes possible without applause. Peace becomes possible without validation. Progress becomes possible without rivalry. You discover that the only comparison worth making is with your past self. And for in the end, the measure of a life is not how it stood beside others, but how it stood with itself. Did you live true to your values? Did you cultivate your garden? Did you grow in virtue, in wisdom, in love? These are the only comparisons that matter. Even then, with compassion.
For in the end, the measure of a life is not how it stood beside others, but how it stood with itself. Did you live true to your values? Did you cultivate your garden? Did you grow in virtue, in wisdom, in love? These are the only comparisons that matter. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet still wrestled with his own mind, left us this reminder. Do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others, when you do not refer your thoughts to some object of common utility. In other words, do not waste your short time here in measuring shadows. Anchor yourself instead in what is real, what is good, what is within your control. And so, let us step out of the prison of comparison. Let us close the door behind us and walk into the sunlight of our own becoming. Let us release the sideways gaze and walk forward with steadiness. Your path is yours. Walk it well. If you felt the weight of comparison loosening as we've walked through these ideas, carry that freedom with you and help spread it. Subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts below, and join a community learning to live by their own measure, not by the yardstick of others.